the view of the future and the luxury of having a future is much stronger than what people think of, which is seizing the day. I don't really mind about the day, I just mind that something awful might happen tomorrow, but I haven't been told what it will be. And I think that's what living with it was, that's what was so hard, was this feeling that I knew what it would be. And I was being told that's what would happen. And by eliminating that, I can live like a normal person. I remember getting into the train and sitting opposite an 80-year-old man, and I was 18, and saying, I might pass out or I might vomit, I'm not quite sure, but can you just keep an eye on me? Which is so, I mean, you know, I look back at some of this stuff and I'm like, wow. I was 18 and I don't think I had the sort of medical vocabulary to think, I definitely didn't think there, oh my God, I'm dying, or I've got cancer, or those would have been the obvious big names. But I did feel truly awful. And I mean, one night I couldn't walk really. I remember crawling into my parents' bed, which I hadn't done since the age of 6. And I was aware that I felt that something wasn't right. I remember getting in the car, Mum had put the seat right down in the passenger seat, and she said, are you okay? And I said, I'm so happy to be going to hospital. The doctor started doing the tests, you know, checking the eyes, checking the hands, and that's when they said you need a brain scan. There was obviously something wrong, and I said to the radiographer, have I got a brain tumour? Because I'd been in the scan and they couldn't let me out. And looking back at it now as a mum, I think it was that moment was much harder for them than for me. Instinctively, I felt like I was in a different place to my peers, but I hadn't been told anything at that stage. And I felt, you know, when you're young and you sort of have these dreads of everything, and I felt like maybe I'd got away with it. Maybe that was my big moment of being in this awful health world, and actually I'd escaped. Generally, I lived a completely normal life. I still got drunk, I still partied, I did everything that I would have done. But when I left university 2 years later, my parents said we need to go and see the neurologist. And that's when, and he had, unbeknown to me, told them what it was. And he was never encouraging surgery, but he really, really sort of drove home how hard it is to live with a time bomb. And the fact that it was in the brainstem meant it wouldn't be it was not a fun time bomb. This was something that could be catastrophic. I was young, I was 26, I was running around New York, I was having crazy times, dancing on tables, and then I was seeing a brain surgeon, and it felt so unnecessary, but so necessary. No English surgeon would go near me. My neurologist by then, I think, had died, so I didn't really have a neurologist in London, and most of the experts I'd spoken to said, don't do this. So I had that, and then I had this, Arizona dude saying, I think I can do it. So it was a leap of faith. And I think what got me over the line was that he was so confident. I remember being on the plane going out there, and someone sending me a text saying truth is in action. So my feet were going one after the other, and I was going forward, and all I wanted to do was go backwards. So it was almost like I was watching my body go into this thing, and everything in me was screaming, don't do this. And when I woke up, that was the biggest message at that moment that I wanted to give someone, is you're not jinxing yourself if you think you're doing the wrong thing. Because I think that was my fear, was everyone gives it this stuff about, you've got to be brave, and you've got to think of it as a battle, and you've got to feel positive. And that meant that every time I felt doubt, I thought I was jinxing myself because I wasn't being positive. And actually that was really unhelpful, because I was terrified. I was pretty convinced it was the wrong thing to do. And that's why that quote, truth in action, was so good, because I just followed the action with everything screaming the opposite. Post first surgery, I thought it was down to me in some way. I thought I had succeeded, or I had done something, or there was an achievement. And the second time around, I was like, actually, this is just, it's all luck. It's all random, and it's all luck. And it's nothing to do with me, which in a way was a lovely thing. But because I'd been celebrating previously, in some way taking credit for it, that was really hard. And so going into the second operation, it was probably worse than the first, because I knew what I was in for. I was dreading the pain. If someone had said, what's the worst thing that could happen to you, I'd have said having to have the second operation. Ironically, The second time round, the surgery was really tough for the surgeon. The first time it was quite easy, but I felt much better. So I came round and I didn't have the intense pain, and it felt much more like the experiences of people that I had heard about who went for surgery and sort of just got better and didn't have this intense pain and recovery. I can't feel my left side for pain and temperature. My vision is double on an angle. My right side is much weaker. I struggle with a lot of things, but you would never know it, and I've learned to deal with that. Since then there have been a few scares. The last scare, I remember lying in the MRI, and by that time I'd had 2 kids, I'd got married, I was 20 years on from the first bleed, and I had this wonderful feeling of, well, yeah, it might be another bleed, but so what? And it was really lovely.